I have three questions for you. I'm gonna wrap it as soon as possible. All right. So the
Okay.
first question is, with this new React update, what's your first impression of it?
Um, my first impression is my code is going to be a lot simpler, especially asynchronous code. I guess there were like two things that he demoed. There was the time slicing and the suspense. And so for suspense, my uh, asynchronous code is going to get a lot simpler. And for time slicing, it's just magically going to be faster.
What do you feel this is going to change for most React developers?
I think that uh, I think most React developers are not going to use this feature like directly. They're not going to create their own fetchers, their own caches and stuff. But most developers will use fetchers like Apollo or something.
Yeah.
Maybe there will be some Redux plugins that come out to integrate with Redux. So I definitely think that this is going to be a widely used feature, and I think it's probably going to be a too widely used feature. We're going to pendulum. This is the React community, like every time. We're going to pendulum swing over to the wrong side of things for a while, and so hopefully we can at least have a little more pragmatic and practical idea of what the use cases actually are before we get too complicated, because for some reason the React community seems to like to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, sure. What I really like here is that, especially with time slicing, a lot of the applications are going to become fast on their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they just like, I don't know how many applications in the world use React right now, but they just made all of them faster on like especially low-end devices, which I'm super
Mm-hmm.
excited about, right? And
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. It's not just like it's not necessarily faster. Like they're not speeding up the devices. Like it's still really the same amount of JavaScript run. And in fact, it's quite possibly more JavaScript will be run. But it's just the right JavaScript will be running, and so it'll appear faster for people. Which I think that is super exciting. And like you said, like most developers, it's just gonna all of a sudden they upgrade and wow, this is suddenly so much faster.
okay. And the last question I have is, so of course, like how the community rolls, right? People have also started criticizing it already on how it's relatively a more complex feature than on the tiny React API, right? How do you feel about that?
I sort of agree. So the React team reached out to me before presenting it and asked my feelings on it, and that was what I communicated to them was like, this is an amazing feature. I'm so excited for this, but how on earth are we going to teach this to people? Because it's like, first of all, like throwing promises. Lots of people don't know you can throw anything but an error, and then just the idea of throwing promises itself, like the first question almost anybody's going to ask is like, what about performance, throwing errors, which of course, like this is we're only doing this for network and IO operations, so that's like we're on the slow path already. Throwing promises isn't going to slow that down. But anyway, I'm a little bit concerned because you look at the render method and you think like, okay, so this is sort of running asynchronously a little bit. Like it'll take a little bit to teach. But I think I saw Dan respond on some of these threads on Twitter, and he said, listen, like this is kind of an advanced feature. You don't have to use this feature. You can still like do the same old asynchronous stuff that you always did. But this is a really useful feature for some use cases, and I think that the community will kind of figure out how to use this effectively. But yeah, I am still a little bit concerned about the teachability. So there will need to be a lot of like educational content about how this feature works.
Right. I guess what you said earlier makes a lot of sense, which we'll all end up using this, but in some other shape or form, right? With a library. Like people do similar stuff with things like Redux Saga or Apollo, right? So we might not directly use it, but we might use it through these libraries, which is perfect.
Well, and exactly, and on top of that, like, is this really that much more complicated than the alternative. Like right now,
Yeah.
fetching data and handling async is actually really complicated and like so varied. And so I'm loving that the React team is kind of taking this like some of these things that are kind of pains in the React community and baking them into the library. Like the new context API, now it's finally blessed and everything, and so now like the prop drilling problem is solved in the framework. And it's not that we couldn't always do this; it's just people freaked out when they saw the context API was experimental and it was going to break.
Right.
And so now, like that's not the case, and not only that, but it's really ergonomic. It's a great API. And so they're kind of solving the application state management problem in the framework, and now they're targeting the asynchronous, management problem. And I think the solution is remarkably good. So I'm looking forward to what the community does with it. I'm sure that some people are going to build some really awesome experiences with this, so I'm looking forward to seeing those demos. I'm nervous about the pendulum swinging. I think we're going to use it too much. We're going to use it in the wrong places, but that's all part of the growing experience of a community as we get in touch with these new features and things. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to things. I think it's going to be great. All right. Hey, thank you so much. I hope that was helpful.
That was very helpful.
Cool.
All right.
Well,
Bye-bye.
see you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.